von Richard Nash. Ich stelle ihn kurz vor und danach wird er dann zu uns geschaltet sein per Skype nach seiner Keynote. Die Keynote hat er vorher aufgezeichnet, da es ziemlich schwierig ist, über Skype gleichzeitig Slides zu zeigen. Also er zeigt Slides und redet dazu und das werden wir abspielen. Es dauert so eine knappe Viertelstunde und danach steht er eben per Skype, ich werde ihn anrufen, noch für Q&A, also Fragen und Antworten zur Verfügung. Ich stelle ihn kurz vor, er lebt in New York und im Moment arbeitet er als Berater für dieses Aggregation-Tool Byliner. Vorher hat er verschiedene recht anerkannte Publishing-Projekte geleitet, unter anderem den Indie-Verlag Soft-Skull Press. Cursor war ein anderes Projekt. Das ist jetzt eine Art Open-Source Community Publishing Project. Von 2011 bis 2013 war er der Head of Partnerships and Content für, wie er sagt, die Culture Discovery Startup Small Demons. Und 2013 hat das UK Booksellers Magazine ihn als eine der 5 inspirierendsten Personen der Verlagsbranche ausgezeichnet. Ich habe ihn einmal getroffen, letztes Jahr auf der Buchmesse, wo haben wir einen Kaffee getrunken und da fand ich ihn auch sehr inspirierend. Unter anderem hat er gesagt, dass Verleger eine Debatte um den Content ihrer Bücher starten sollten, also dass das Buch nicht das Ende sei, sondern der Anfang. Er sagte, the book is not the end, but the beginning of something. So, jetzt werde ich diese Keynote aufrufen, so dass das klappt. Und wir hören dann seinen Talk. Also, er sagt selber den Titel an, es ist auf Englisch, viel Spaß dabei.
Scatter, Adapt, and Remember is the title of a book about human extinction, or rather why humans won't die out in the next extinction. It looks at all the reasons why different species have survived meteor attacks, massive depletions of carbon dioxide, massive ice ages, and other epic extinctions. And it identifies 3 strategies: scattering, adapting, and remembering. And it's my belief that publishing is in the process of embracing those 3 strategies in order to thrive in the future as a means for accumulating and disseminating knowledge and narrative. Now, up until the printing press, the world's publishers effectively were the state and the church, frequently working in concert. But with the advent of the printing press, we had obviously a new and very radical and revolutionary mode, a mode that in many respects completely upended the church and the state, changed our views of science, religion, narrative, even things as fundamental as visual perspective. Most interestingly, as in this depiction of one of the printing presses of 17th century England, it was social. People gathered. And most notably in this particular depiction of a bookstore from late 18th century France, we also see a remarkable degree of sociability. People gathered around books. And most interestingly, in both these cases, these were again further radical innovations. The radical innovation of the printing press we're all familiar with. We're less familiar with the fact that the bookstore was the first time in recorded human history that people were allowed to browse the products before having to purchase them. Traditionally, buying things required saying what you wanted, the person going into a back storeroom, dumping it in front of you, and taking your money. The bookstore was the first instance of empowering the consumer in Western history. The next step in the empowering of the consumer is slightly less well known, the Penguincubator, invented by a British publisher, Alan Lane, the founder of Penguin Press. What was fascinating about this is that it was an effort to make books completely pervasive, rather than trying to bring people to where the books are. Their insight was to bring the books to where the people were, to put books in vending machines and railway stations and in public plazas, and through high volume paperback printing, to make books as cheap as possible, to make books the price of a packet of cigarettes. So in many respects, while Alan Lane has now become sort of an icon of Anglo-American publishing, the reality is that he was very clearly the Jeff Bezos of his time, making it incredibly cheap and incredibly convenient to buy books, and popularizing an entirely new platform, in Alan Lane's case, the paperback, and in Jeff Bezos' case, the ebook. Now, what has this meant in practice? Well, what this has meant in practice is that in many ways, books, digital or otherwise, have kept pace with other revolutions in the web. This is data, and very specifically digital data, obviously, since we have very, very little data about people's print reading habits. But here is digital data from a company called Blue Fire Reader, who provide white label services to over 100 small to medium-sized publishers and retailers across North America, Europe, and Asia. And we'll see here that 1/3 of readers on that device spend an hour or more a day, and half the readers spend a half hour or more per day, which happens to be precisely the average daily aggregated session time for Facebook. So as it turns out, the book, the ebook, is as effective as Facebook in terms of achieving stickiness. But how do we go past that? Because if there's one thing we have seen around ebooks, it is tremendously difficult to maintain price points on them. So what can we do to make ebooks more powerful? And for that, I again go back in history, although not quite as far as the church or as 16th and 18th century Britain and France. We go to Borges. And Borges is a man who fundamentally understood that the book, although we think of it as a static container, and we compare it unfavorably to the networked internet, the book was always a network in and of itself, with vast and dense references, allusions to people, places, things. And we'll see in a couple of minutes one particular instance of how that could be instantiated in the reading experience. So what this suggests is that the real opportunity around books is understanding them neither as containers nor as files, but as services. And it's quite obvious why we would want to do that. Manufacturing employment in the West, these statistics are from the United States, but they apply across the Western economies. Manufacturing employment has collapsed, whereas services are growing tremendously. If one looks at that more closely, one begins to see even more specific opportunities for publishing, digital publishing, because editorial is irreplaceable. There are a great many substitutes for what we do in the world of publishing. A great many substitutes on the web that are free, a great many substitutes amongst video, a great many different tools for producing ebooks. But the thing that we can always rely on is that editors aren't going anywhere. In fact, The Economist magazine summarized a good deal of recent research in the future of work, which suggests that editors are 3 times less likely to lose their jobs in the next 20 years than firefighters, and almost 10 times less likely to lose their jobs than commercial airplane pilots. How might that be the case? Well, a critical thing to understand is that the print book had only 1 or at most 2 price points, the paperback and the hardcover. The ebook has added a 3rd price point. But as ebooks become services represented not just in digital downloads, but in all kinds of different subscription services, and as they become disaggregated and integrated in more with the web, as they can be included in education products, as they can be in print culture converted into highly artisanal, expensive artistic editions, one can generate a very, very, very broad productization of the narrative, of the analytic book, of the essay. To give some more concrete examples from a series of recent startups, this here you see are screenshots from work we did, although this was never released, at Small Demons. And there are 2 key things we were doing there. One is to enliven the reading experience itself in a way designed to be richer than simply X-Ray, the Kindle product, where you could tap on people, places, music, movies, food, drinks, cars, guns, drugs, and learn more about them. Learn all the stuff that there is to find out about them on DBpedia or in Freebase or in the iTunes Store or on Spotify or on Netflix. And moreover, within the e-commerce experience, not just the reading experience, but the e-commerce experience, every song could have included the books that mention the song. Every book mentioning all the movies that are mentioned inside the book. A horizontal cultural browsing experience within the mobile platform. Here's a much more narrow but quite delightful example of a company that has tagged poems so that you can create a weather app that provides not just whether it's going to rain or not, or what the temperature is, but also a poem that is appropriate to the weather and to the time of year. And finally, here's a startup that I worked with most recently, Byliner, focused on taking shorter form material, short stories, essays, magazine articles, and finding new ways to combine them in a browsing, app-based reading experience. Lastly, however, I think I need to emphasize that these are very, very, very early efforts at rethinking of the book container as not a product, that is bought in a unitary form or even downloaded in a unitary form, but as a service. And the critical way I think we have to think about services is that they make people want more. And so this is an image of the jawbone up, a instance of a quantified self, a device that tracks how well I sleep, how much I walk, and so on and so forth. And I think that what we need for the years to come is to understand the quantified self for reading. For if we increase the total pie, then we are in a position to be able to negotiate with content owners in a much more convenient and powerful way than heretofore. So I look forward to chatting with you on Skype and later today over Twitter. This is my information, my email, my Twitter. Feel free, if you don't have time to hear or get questions from me today, to email me yourself anytime next week, next month, next year, next decade. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.
Man muss dazu sagen, es ist 4 Uhr morgens der Zeit in New York. Er ist extra für uns aufgestanden. Hello. Good morning.
Hi, please.
Now the applause for you. Hello. Thanks so much for getting up that early. Just for the case for the e-books and for the books and for the industry. And thanks for this very optimist talk. We all now feel very safe that we won't lose our jobs as editors. Thank you. Is there already a question from the audience? Because I think it's your opportunity to ask, which is something. Okay. Otherwise, I have one first question, which would be that you were showing the slide, showing, it was named "Bring on the Personal Trainer." So I was wondering, what in your fantasy would look like? Could you describe the personal book trainer? How would he or she work and look like? What is the editing job of the personal book trainer?
I think there's 2 dimensions. One key dimension around the personal book trainer obviously is the traditional activity of editing, which is making writing better, which is a very subtle both cultural activity and an emotional activity. The second dimension is effectively the act of being a cultural go-between, a person who understands what the book is trying to accomplish in the culture and can, through means both personal and technological, be working to connect that book to its potential readers. So the editorial activity of the future is both a combination of being a psychotherapist and also the work of being an evangelist.
Okay. So I look again if there is any question in the audience. Yes, there is one. So she comes up here so you can actually see someone. Hi, Richard. Can you see me?
Hi.
Good morning. How did you sleep? Did you sleep at all? Okay, here's my question. Being a very big fan of by dinner,
I just read that Berliner is in some trouble. And I'm sorry that I have to ask you, but is it true that there's trouble, or can you calm me down and give us satisfaction that everything is doing fine with Berliner, which is a great platform?
Thank you for those kind words. There is difficulty, and I don't honestly yet know what the outcome will be. A lot of the challenges, it's difficult to speak about things going on that are still confidential, but I'll give you a general background, which is that many startups suffer from problems that have nothing to do with how good the idea is.
That's right.
And one of the things that can be a problem around publishing, which isn't as used to dealing with startups as other industries, is that they mistake the difficulties of a particular company for a problem with the vision and idea of that company, rather than very specific problems that can occur within a company. And I'll speak more specifically to a company I was at before this, a company called Small Demons, where really the reason Small Demons failed was because of miscommunications with investors, combined with some bad luck around an acquisition. And it had sort of nothing to do with the actual business model. So while I can't completely say that everything will be fine with Byliner, I will say that the news that things were difficult with Byliner brought out a lot of activity and response in social media and in traditional media, which was a sign, I think, of great optimism.
That's good. Yeah, I hope so too.
People care.
Okay.
And if people care, there's a business model.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hello, me again. Anybody else? Up for a question? There's a mic also over there, but you can also come up on stage. Otherwise, I have another question, which would rather tackle this idea of the book as a service. And something you didn't talk about so much was the whole thing of data exploration. Many people here in Germany, at least, they are afraid of, when they read an ebook, their reading habits become transparent, and then we have this transparent reader. And so I think this is a common fear here in the German. Well, it's not my fear, but I have to say. So maybe you can talk a little bit about this. What do you think is the role of data in reading in the future? Is it part of the service, or is it rather something which is a business model in itself?
Yeah, so that is a complicated issue, especially in Europe in general and Germany in particular, which has different cultural and habits and expectations around privacy, certainly relative to the United States. It is certainly the case that there is a lot of interest in using anonymized data as a way to support the business of digital publishing. One of the things that print publishing has never been able to do is generate an advertising model. And obviously an advertising model is the dominant model for content on the web right now. So there are naturally people curious about ways in which one can transport the advertising model to a digital book publishing in the way that it's been transported to other forms of digital publishing. What I think is potentially more interesting and also perhaps more reassuring to the German reading public is that I suspect the value of data in book reading lies more in what the data can do for the consumer than what data can do for the producer. And that's what I was hinting at toward the end of my talk. The power of what quantified self does, at least in its most positive dimensions, is that when you understand your own process better, you act better. So the logic behind quantified self is that if I know how much I'm walking each day, if I know how well I'm sleeping at night, knowing that information will cause me to act the way that I want to. And I believe that the key reading is a lot like exercise. It's a thing that you know you should do more of, but you have a bad habit of not doing it exactly in the moment. Stupid cat videos are a lot like ice cream. They're hard to say no to right now, even if later in the day you wish you hadn't. And so the ability of technology to empower the individual reader to understand his or her reading habits and perhaps modify his or her reading habits. That, I think, is where the great opportunity is around data, and conveniently that would be a more German-friendly approach to data. I think the producer-centric view of data will ultimately be a relatively limited one.
Okay, so thank you so far. We kind of we have like 1 minute left, so there is a very short question that popped up. In the meantime, no, I will show you your audience. Wait, I tried to knock you on the table. Go to sleep probably. Have a good sleep. Bye.